Hello guys. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm gonna be talking about Luo Yi, one of the hardest mage in the game. In this video, I will also discuss how Luo Yi works in full details, which includes her passive, skills, builds, emblems, combos, along with some tips and guide on how to use her in a match. So without further ado, let's get started with the video. Luo Yi was given for free to all the players who logged into the game on May 16, 2020. And unlike other heroes, Luo Yi is surprisingly balanced and easy to play. But she's difficult to master, especially if you don't understand her skills. So, as always, in order to master a hero, you must first understand how her skills and passive works. I usually start explaining the passive first, but for Luo Yi, I will combine her passive and first skill and explain them together, so that it won't be confusing. So let's get started with her passive and first skill. With the help of her first skill, Luo Yi casts the energy of yin and yang in the target direction, dealing 210 magic damage to the first enemy hit. And every time you use her first skill, the color of her first skill will be changed. And enemies hit by her first skill will be marked with a sigil of yin and yang. And the mark can be seen besides their health bar. And sigils of opposite attributes will trigger a yin-yang reaction, dealing 350 magic damage to the marked enemies. In easy words, if the enemies marked by the yellow and black colors stand near each other, they will get pulled towards each other, receiving magic damage and being unable to move for 1 second. But if there is only one enemy, then you will not be able to trigger a yin-yang reaction. And there needs to be at least 2 enemies, and you need to hit each enemy with a different color of your first skill. And remember, the enemies need to be close to each other in order to trigger a yin-yang reaction. And each time she applies a new sigil to a marked enemy, she gains a 300 shield, along with 50% extra movement speed that decays over 3 seconds. Remember, your first skill is your main source of damage, so make sure to max out this skill first. And you must also keep in mind that your first skill's base damage is low, so if you're unable to trigger a yin-yang reaction, then you will have a hard time with her. And since her first skill is a shooting skill, you must properly aim it in order to hit the enemies, as it is very easy to miss, so you should never auto-tap her first skill while the enemy is moving. Now, let's talk about her second skill. With the help of her second skill, Luo Yi summons Fire of Yang and Aqua at the target location, dealing 250 magic damage to enemies hit, and slowing them by 60% for 0.5 seconds. And just like her first skill, her second skill can also change colors with each cast. And you can also trigger the yin-yang reaction using her second skill. Her second skill is pretty much the same as your first skill, and the requirements to trigger a yin-yang reaction is the same as your first skill. But you must remember, even though her second skill can trigger a yin-yang reaction, it does not mark the enemies like her first skill. Meaning if the enemies leave the area of your second skill, they can avoid the yin-yang reaction. And if there are multiple enemies inside your second skill, the yin-yang reaction will only affect the enemy that is hit by your first skill. But if you're lucky and you manage to hit both the enemies inside your second skill, then the yin-yang reaction will affect both the enemies. And as for her combo, I'd recommend you to use her first skill first, followed by your second skill in quick succession. And this way, the enemies will have lower chances of escaping, allowing you to trigger a yin-yang reaction. And I'd recommend you to always keep the opposite colors on your first and second skill, so that you will be able to trigger a yin-yang reaction even if the enemies launch a surprise attack. Remember, Luo Yi is strong, but she's really weak if you cannot trigger the yin-yang reaction. So you must be mindful of that, and play safely behind your tank. Now, let's talk about her ultimate. With the help of her ultimate, you can drag her ultimate and choose a location, and upon choosing the location you want, Luo Yi creates a teleportation circle around herself, and after a short delay, she gets teleported to the location. And if your teammates are inside your ultimate, they will also get teleported with you. This skill might seem useless at first glance, but it's honestly a very good ability, as you can use this skill to launch surprise attacks. And aside from that, you could also use this skill to rotate around the map, and you can also use this to get a wider view of the map. And during a team fight, you could also use this skill to escape from the enemies. And if you drag the teleport circle outside the map, you will end up at the nearest wall. But remember, the enemies can see your teleportation circle, so always make sure to use this skill on bushes, so that you will have higher chances of successfully teleporting without the enemies noticing. Now, let's talk about her builds and emblems. For her builds, you can use different kinds of items depending on the situation and your playstyle. But if you're playing against squishy enemies, then I'd recommend you to go for this build. And remember, Enchanted Talisman is her core item, as it provides her with immense mana regeneration, along with cooldown reduction. And if you didn't know, her first skill also benefits from cooldown reduction, allowing you to cast her first skill more often. So Enchanted Talisman should always be your first item. And if you're playing against tanky enemies, then I'd recommend you to go for this build. This build will allow you to melt the tanky enemies without much problem. And remember, whether the enemies are tanky or not, you must always buy Glowing Wand if the enemies pick heroes with HP regen and healing abilities, as Glowing Wand will reduce the shield and HP regen effects on them to 50% of normal for 3 seconds. Now, let's talk about her emblems and talents. For her emblem, the Custom Mage emblem is the best emblem for her. And for her first talent, go for Inspire. Inspire will provide you with 5% cooldown reduction, reducing the cooldown of your skills and allowing you to cast your skills more often. And for her second talent, go for Wilderness Blessing. Wilderness Blessing will increase your movement speed in the river and jungle by 10%, allowing you to rotate quicker. And for her core talent, go for Lethal Ignition. Lethal Ignition will increase your chances of successfully killing the enemies. Now, let's talk about her gameplay and how to use her in a match. During the early game, make sure to unlock your first skill, and use it to poke and harass the enemy mage. And always try to last hit the minions, as last hitting the minions will give you extra gold. And once you reach level 3, you can start rotating around the map depending on the situation. And if you see one of your side laners fighting a 2vs1, then your job as a mage should be rotating to their lane and supporting them as much as you can. But remember, even if you rotate to the side lane, never stay in the side lanes for too long, and always make sure to return to your lane once a new wave of minions gets spawned, especially if the enemy side laner is playing safe. But if your teammates are doing well, then I'd recommend you to continue farming on your lane, and possibly try to push the mid lane if no one is around. Remember, your main priority as the mage during the early game should be rotating around the map, as rotating around the map and helping your teammates will greatly increase the chances of winning. And during the mid game, your goal should still be the same, and you should continue supporting your team. But during the mid game, you must be careful while rotating around the map, as this is the stage where the enemies will start targeting you. So always try to rotate with your tank, but if your tank is not with you, then you should rotate through your jungle. And that way, you will have higher chances of ganking the enemies without dying. And whenever the turtle gets spawned, you must always try to help your jungler secure the turtle, as securing the turtle could greatly increase the chances of snowballing the enemies. And whenever there is a teamfight, you should remember that you are very squishy and easy to kill, so always stay behind your teammates during a teamfight. And remember, the way you position yourself during a teamfight will always decide the outcome of the teamfight, since you are the main damage dealer of your team. And remember, Luo Yi is weak against heroes with multiple dash abilities, as they can easily dodge your first skill. So always make sure to properly aim your skills when playing against heroes with dash abilities. Now, let's talk about her late game. During the late game, teamwork is crucial for successful team fights. Try to make use of your ultimate by asking your teammates to join you when teleporting. Remember, if your teammates join you in your ultimate, you and your team will easily be able to launch surprise attacks. But if your teammates are not joining you in your ultimate, then I'd recommend you to be careful when using your ultimate, as the enemies could see your teleportation circle, and they could possibly wait for you when using your ultimate. And during the late game, you must never rotate around the map alone. I'd recommend you to always stay with your tank or fighter, as they could act as a shield even if the enemies launch a surprise attack. And always make sure to check every single bush before entering one, as the enemies will mostly camp on the bushes, waiting to ambush you and finish you off. Remember, timing and positioning is the key to winning during the late game. So always be wary of your positioning, and always wait for the perfect timing before entering a teamfight. Because the enemies will always try to kill you first, and if the enemies kill you first, your teammates will have a hard time during a teamfight. So, what do you think about Luo Yi? Make sure to let me know your thoughts in the comments, and consider leaving a like on the video if you haven't. And subscribe to my channel if you're new. I make tutorials and informative videos about the game. Thank you for watching.
Blue team destroyed a turret.
Everyone has the right